Welcome to Conservation Fridays.
The one and only podcast about preserving the rural charm and great outdoors of Barry County in Southwest Michigan. We chat with locals, experts, and groups in natural resources for folks who love forests, waterways, and wildlife. Exciting things are happening that we want to talk about. Every first Friday, host Rachel Frantz
And Jamie Lewis Hedges bring you fresh interviews. If something interesting pops up in between, we'll share that too. So grab your spot, kick back, and join us for Conservation Talk. It's the Barry Conservation District podcast where nature meets neighbor. Today, we're joined by Rachel Frantz from Barry Conservation District, who started Conservation Fridays and who has been working as the coordinator for Barry County Recycles with the Solid Waste Oversight Commission of Barry County. We'll be discussing today conservation through recycling, Barry County Recycles. But before we dive in, Rachel, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be a host on a guest on my own show.
Yeah, it's fun. Thank you for letting me jump in and be a partner with you on this because I think it'll be a lot of fun. Well, let's start off by just tell us about yourself. Who are you?
Well, I'm a wife and mother. I've got two great girls. I enjoy working outdoors, and I'm especially interested in native plants, the Thornapple River, and of course, recycling.
Well, we've talked a little bit about this. And one of the things that I was excited to discuss with you today was I wanted everyone to learn a little bit about your journey. What brought you into conservation work before Barry Conservation District? How did that interest develop for you?
Yeah. Well, conservation has always really been close to my heart since I was pretty young. My family traveled in an RV and I spent a lot of time outdoors. I remember times in Arizona just seeing different landscapes and all the different ecosystems throughout even just America. And it's always fascinated me. I initially went to college in hopes of one day conserving and studying gray wolves. Instead, I found a love for plants. So that worked out pretty well. After I graduated, I landed a job at the Grand Valley Metro Council under Wendy Ogilvie. She mentored me and allowed me to continue my education learning about green infrastructure, native plants, and stormwater, and just the greater effects that all of that has on a watershed.
You said Arizona. Where in Arizona?
I was only about 4 or 5 years old, so I really don't know for sure. But
That,
I specifically remember there were like water slides through rock features that you could go down, and it was very exciting as a small child.
We lived in Tucson, Arizona for 5 years and did a lot of traveling around the state. That state reminds me a lot of Dr. Seuss books and the way you describe the water going through the rock and everything.
I could totally see that.
So you came on to Barry Conservation District initially, if I understand correctly, to do RCPP work. What was that going to be?
Yeah. So shortly after I moved to Hastings in 2021, a job opened up at the district for a conservation technician. The main focus of that job was for the RCPP, or Regional Conservation Partnership Program. That work would have been focused on working with agricultural producers and landowners to implement best practices on their farms to reduce nutrient runoff, conserve soil, and improve watershed health and water quality. So it would have been a lot of outreach, education, and just working directly with farmers to implement those best management practices that would help them save money, save soil, and help also the environment.
What attracted you to doing that?
Since I grew up in Caledonia, which is just a stone's throw away, and I was always really just accustomed to agriculture and being around it. Working in Grand Rapids, I didn't have a chance to do a lot of that work. So I was really attracted to the idea of actually getting out there and meeting farmers and getting to know their work a little bit more, and then also helping to preserve and improve water quality.
Hmm. For the uninitiated, such as me, coming from outside the conservation district world, can you connect that a little bit? Like when you think about landowners and farmers and water quality, how does what make that connection for me? How does that?
Okay, yeah. So when it rains, the water runs off. It runs off your lawn, it runs off the road, it runs off agricultural fields, and it picks up anything that's really in its path. So that could be manure on a field, it could be dog poop on your lawn, salt in your driveway. All of that is then getting carried into the storm drains, or if you're in a more agricultural area, just the ditch. And the storm drains and the ditches all lead to the rivers, rivers lead to the lakes, so on and so forth. So it really goes across the board. Everybody's responsible for their land and how that runoff, like what it's picking up. So there's a lot of different things you can install green infrastructure wise, but also on agricultural land, like cover crops and buffer strips that would have native plants, or well, cover crops probably not native plants, but some sort of plant life that would help to filter that runoff before it hits the waterways, and then reducing the amount of nutrients, phosphorus, E. coli, et cetera, that are then going into the water.
Hmm. So that is the piece where native shoreline restoration work comes in, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I did a lot of rain garden work at the Grand Valley Metro Council. We called it the rainscaping program. So that was really focused on residentials and catching roof runoff and then holding it in a rain garden, which is basically a garden filled with native plants in kind of the shape of a bowl. So it would have an inlet, and then the water could accumulate there and then soak in instead of running off the lawn into the storm drain. So after I learned that, an opportunity came out from the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership to get training in natural shoreline work. And since I was already really into native plants and just green infrastructure, that was a really obvious next step for me. So I took the contractor training, and then being in the city of Grand Rapids, there's not a lot of lakes really right there that was in our service area. I will say they do work throughout the whole lower Grand watershed, but a lot of my work was focused in Grand Rapids. So once I started at the district, I was actually able to start implementing what I learned through the contractor training and put in natural shorelines in Berry County. And yeah, just to kind of connect all of that. So the shoreline is the buffer between the lake and the property. So kind of like the buffer I talked about with the agricultural field. This is the same sort of idea, except for it's also adding habitat and wildlife cover, wildlife food, bird food, and then also pollinator habitat. So it's really a lot of things are encompassed in a natural shoreline.
And is that you emphasized lakes there? Is there a comparable level of impact with rivers on shorelines, riparian area?
There is the course that I took was very specific to inland lakes, and the way that lake water works is different than rivers. So a lot of the applications can be for both a lake and a river shoreline, but not all of it. So I believe that they are working on a river course to complement the existing course. So I will definitely be taking that. But it's the same idea really happens. Don't mow to the edge and have a native plant buffer area, because those native plants have really long roots that help hold the soil together and reduce erosion.
You get excited about native plants.
I do.
Why is that? Why do they resonate with you so much, do you think?
I think after really learning about the benefits, I don't know who wouldn't be so excited. When I was at Elgrow, I made a kind of an Excel sheet so you could choose your own native plants based on your soil and sunlight availability. And also bloom time, color, height, all of that. There's so many different types of native plants, and I get all the catalogs. I love the way they look. I love the benefits they provide for different species of butterflies and other insects. I actually, behind me, I'm doing a little experiment to show root growth on native plants. I created with some picture frame, just the glass. We were using the frames for something else. So I decided to take the glass and solder them together so that I could have kind of a clear vase so we could watch the root growth. In retrospect, it's not nearly deep enough because native plant roots can grow, I don't know, meters. I don't know how to compare that to feet, but
Yeah.
they grow very, very deep, much deeper than the 6 inches I have in that glass case.
We were talking about Arizona a moment ago, and one of the um, botanical interests that came up in Arizona was with saguaros, which are those, great big stereotypical arm out cacti that grow in the Sonoran Desert. And I can't remember the exact statistic, but when it rains, the those plants can shoot out their roots to the tune of so many feet in minutes, to capture as much of that rain as possible. So fast that when you hear how fast those roots go out, it really kind of it's almost threatening to think about how quickly the plant's going to adapt to that.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's always interested me how different ecoregions can have such different plants. When before I came here, I would look at jobs in other states, and so a lot of the requirements were knowledge of local flora and fauna, which I didn't have, and that kind of bummed me out. But I really like to focus on what we have here, and maybe someday when I've got that knowledge under control, I can expand, because cacti are so interesting and I've never heard of that. So I'd really like to look more into that.
Yeah, they are very interesting as a plant, and I agree with you that in general, native plants, and the niche or the role that they fill in an ecosystem are just really fascinating. So that was, kind of bringing us into what you initially were going to do here for Berry Conservation District, but that's not what you're doing now. You currently primarily work as coordinator for Berry Recycles. How did you come into that position?
Yeah, so shortly after I started, the recycling coordinator position kind of became available. It was a little bit of a surprise, but the previous director asked me if I would be interested in working on this county contract. It was an annual contract, so just 1 year, and I thought, yeah, I could totally do that. I've been recycling for as long as I can remember, so I it seems like a natural fit, and outreach and education is something that I've been doing for, well, since I graduated college, really. So it worked out, and yeah, it's something that I'm passionate about, so it's easy to share information with people that you're already passionate about.
So explain this position, the role that you do, to the public. Like, what does the coordinator do for Berry Recycles? What's your job?
Yeah, so the recycling coordinator works with the county's solid waste oversight committee to assist with many aspects of recycling in the county. So now I'm in my third annual contract. So the first task that I had when I started was to get our county's recycling and disposal guide up to date. So that was a lot of reviewing information and updating, calling around and seeing what people accept. So it's a lot of resource sharing with the people of the county to let them know what's available, how to get in contact with that, and also just how to recycle and dispose of materials correctly. Um, I also do multiple outreach methods. I write a monthly column in the Reminder, which is our local paper. And then, of course, I created a Facebook page and an Instagram account, and then I keep the website up to date as well. So we just put out information about our events. I assist with the semi-annual household hazardous waste collection event. One of the other main tasks that they had when I started was to get some electronics recycling going on. So we actually have Padnos right here in town, and it's like, well, why don't we reach out to them? They do that. So we were able to connect with them and start that. So we've done that for 2 years now. And then, of course, I also represent the county at different recycling conferences and just relay that information back to our board of commissioners so that they know what's going on just the general recycling level, on the state level, and also on a national level.
Sounds like an important role. You talked about or described it in a way that made me think of being the central liaison for a lot of different conversations. Am I getting that right?
Definitely, yeah. So I also work as a liaison between the local municipalities, like the townships, city, and the villages in the county, between them, helping them develop different programs, and also just between them and the board of commissioners in the county, just to help those lines stay clear and make sure everybody understands and can help each other when it's logical.
So, what's the driving focus behind Berry Recycles?
So Berry County Recycles was actually started years prior to my arrival with a woman named Sarah Archer from the Iris Waste Diversion Specialist Group. She was really instrumental in forming Berry County Recycles. She kind of put the information together. She did some different studies on what was available in each township as far as curbside recycling, drop-off recycling, what items were accepted in there, the population, who has access, things like that. She also put together the disposal guide. Let's see. And then the biggest driving force for me personally, after taking all of the information that she had put together, is just getting 100% access to all county residents, because I think at the time she published her study, which was 2018, there was 64% access to recycling through curbside or drop off. But only a small portion of that was actually recycled. Like, only a small portion of those people were actually using the programs available to them and recycling. So my goal is to get 100% access through the county with at least drop off, but ideally curbside.
In the progression towards that goal, and since 2018, what have been kind of the high points of progress over the last couple of years?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, to be honest. We have lost one of our really great hauling companies, which was Less's. They were a locally owned company. The community really liked them. And a bigger company took them over, which was Granger. And that made a little bit of a shift in not only what was accepted in our bins, but also the frequency of pickup. So the access has kind of remained stagnant, but with the new material management planning requirements from the state, we are hoping to see that really jump up and get a lot more robust. So we're working closely with Granger and WM and well, mainly those two right now. We do have a couple other smaller haulers in the county, but we really want to bridge that gap. But since I started, we were able, like I said, to implement the electronics recycling program. So 2 to 3 times a year, we offer a recycling collection for electronics specifically at no cost to residents. We do suggest a $10 donation for TVs of any size, because they are pretty expensive to recycle. Additionally, we've received a grant for that and a grant for the tire recycling to continue that and keeping it free for the residents so that we don't have to deal with the dumping that can happen.
We're going to talk more about the electronic recycling and maybe touch on dumping again a little later after the break. But I wanted to pause here for a second before then. One of the things that you consistently share that I personally find really incredible about Berry County is how much community support there is for Berry Recycles and for the recycling program. Can you talk a little bit about how this kind of grassroots support for recycling makes an impact on its success and how you've experienced that?
Definitely. I'll say, on the Facebook page, there is a handful of people that are always there. They're always liking and sharing and contributing information. But the community support is so important for the success of this program. There's a new group that formed recently, the Berry County Earth Day Committee. They are a great grassroots organization who has helped me spread the word and also has implemented their own programs. They're currently collecting athletic shoes at, I believe they are up to 3 locations now, and they're continuing to expand that. And they're just, people from maybe a few different organizations, but mostly it's just individual people who care about the earth and they care about recycling, they care about the mission, and they want to help. And having people talk to their friends and neighbors as people instead of as an organization makes such a big difference in helping others learn how to recycle and also why they should, and just make them really want to be more involved and do the right thing.
Love that. So, just want to remind everybody right now that they are a part of Conservation Fridays. On the other side of this break, Rachel, I want to ask you to introduce the concept of recycling for someone who knows absolutely nothing about it. That's a tall order, I know. We're going to take a quick break here. I want to take a moment to invite everyone to Faces of Conservation. Each year, Berry Conservation District puts on this event as a networking social in Southwest Michigan, focused on professionals working in natural resources, conservation, outdoor recreation, parks, etc., and their supporters. Organizations represented so far include the Conservation District, the Barry Eaton District of Health Department, the Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds. I stuttered that out. MDARD, Michigan Department of Natural Resources, Michigan State University Extension, Natural Resources Conservation Service, Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy, Pierce Cedar Creek Institute, Pro Habitats, and the Thornapple River Watershed Council. Great group of organizations that are very much a part of conservation here in Berry County as well as Southwest Michigan. This year, Faces of Conservation is from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on February 23rd. And there is hors d'oeuvres and a cash bar. And we are really hoping that you can attend to get to know these organizations, to get to know other people who are invested in conservation in the area. So please get your tickets soon. You can find those at berrycd.org/FOC for Faces of Conservation. Again, that's berrycd for Conservation District.org/FOC for Faces of Conservation. Okay, Rachel, when I first moved out west Oregon, this was years ago, they had recycling very much instituted and put in place for the communities out there. I moved from Indiana, and coming from the Midwest, I had very little comprehension beyond just the concept of it, of recycling or how to do that. So we would take the truck in and load up all our recycling and take it apart and organize it and throw it into the specific receptacles that each of these items was supposed to go in. And not knowing how that worked, I was, behaviorally stuttering my way through this process and asking, well, where does this one go? And where does that one go? And the person that I worked with doing this, who was from Oregon and had always had recycling available, got really frustrated with me and yelled at me for peeling the labels off of bottles, and got really frustrated with me for putting the wrong item in the wrong receptacle. And it was a learning opportunity for me to realize, hey, other people have done this their entire life, and it's just a accepted, taken for granted part of living in this community. And it was a good learning experience for him to realize that that was not everybody in our country, let alone the world. And so we had a good moment of both of us stepping back and recognizing that not everybody knows how this goes or how to do this, how to recycle. So pretend you're talking to me back then, somebody does not understand recycling at all. What does that term recycle mean? Start with that and then walk us through the concept of recycling.
Definitely. So I will say I resonate with your friend there because sometimes I get frustrated with my husband um, because he doesn't know, and it's not his fault. He just didn't grow up doing it. It's second nature to me now. But the rules do change, and they change relatively often. So the label thing, that's an old rule that has since been squashed, that we don't have to remove labels anymore. But recycling. So I think that recycling means different things to different people. Sometimes I look at it as the creation of something new from something old. So I like to look back at paper recycling. It's one of the oldest forms of recycling, having said to be started in Japan in the 9th century, although it is also assumed that it could have actually started in China where paper was invented. Nobody knows. I'm sure somebody knows, but I don't know for sure. But the process to recycle paper is breaking it down into smaller pieces, mixing it with water into a pulp, so it's kind of a homogeneous mixture where it all looks the same, and then reforming it with a press. So that's one example of recycling, where you're just taking the old stuff, breaking it down, kind of reformatting it into a new product. There's also other items that are recycled in kind of the same manner, like metal, aluminum specifically, and then glass, both of which are endlessly recyclable, meaning they can be recycled over and over and over again without losing anything. Plastic recycling, on the other hand, is very different. And it's different for every type of plastic. And I will not pretend that I understand a lot of that. But from what I do understand, it needs to be broken down into smaller pieces, processed, sorted, not necessarily in that order. But there are some plastics that can't be broken down that way and have to be broken down chemically, which is far beyond my knowledge. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, you should look into that more. It's a very interesting process. But there are different types of recycling, even just in our state, where we have sorted recycling, where every item, plastic can even be broken down further into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because there's 7 different types of plastic that are recyclable. And then, your metal, glass, cardboard, paper, that would all be sorted into separate bins. I have always grown up with single stream recycling, which is where I put every recyclable in the same bin. And this is the most convenient for businesses and residents to do, but it leads to more potential contamination of those materials. Because say, for example, you put in your glass pickle jar with the paper and the plastic and all the other things. But when the glass pickle jar gets tossed from your bin into the garbage truck or the recycling truck, it shatters. And now there's shards of glass everywhere. And that could get broken up into the paper. And now the paper is getting all wet from the pickle juice. And so now that paper is no longer recyclable. If you're sorting them, they're much less likely to be contaminated.
That makes a lot of sense. So our recycling programs going more towards the sorting as opposed to the single stream?
Unfortunately, not always. That would be the ideal because it produces a better feedstock for the people who are actually recycling these products. But it's just so much more trouble and work to do it that way, because then you would have 7 bins in your yard that you have to put out, or 7 bins that you've got to carry in your car to the recycling drop-off center, which is not to say that it can't be done. You could put it all in one bin and maybe layers or something like that, but it's a lot more difficult. So in this day and age, convenience is king, and people will choose to do single stream as opposed to sorted just because it's easier.
Yeah, I get that. You brought up earlier on the other side of the break of trying to avoid people throwing out garbage or dumping it. And as a lifelong outdoor recreationist, this stands out to me because it is unfortunately fairly commonplace to be out in the woods hunting, taking a hike, and the trail comes close to a road, and you're crossing a ravine, and you look down that ravine, and there is everything from tires to refrigerators to car to full automobiles, that are dumped off of the road into that ravine. This is kind of I guess, asking you to imagine or to think about what other people's motivations are. But why do you think people do that? Why do they toss garbage?
The easiest answer is out of sight, out of mind. I cannot understand why or how anyone would dispose of things in a river or on the side of a road. I have a really hard time understanding litter other than like, I don't want it in my car anymore and I can't wait 5 minutes till I'm at the gas station. But as far as just throwing garbage out in general, it's the easiest solution. I don't want this item anymore. I'll put it in this bin and then it's gone. Instead of having to think about, what is this? Can I reuse this? Can I donate it? Does somebody else want or need this? What other use could this have? Or could it be recycled? Could it be composted? That takes a lot more thought. And people don't generally want to do that. They want to go on to the next thing. They want to get rid of the item and move on.
Do you think one of the things I wonder about, especially where it comes to tires, maybe, but we just collaborated with Thornapple River Watershed Council, and went out in the river in our watercraft and picked up things out of there. And there was, I kind of went through this thought process of imagining, how did this end up here? And you find clothing in the river, and you're like, okay, people got there and they were stripping down to their swimsuits, so that's understandable. But then I find these tires, and imagining how tires end up in ravines or riversides or wherever. One of the things that I think about is when you're trying to get rid of old tires, even if you do that at the tire place, when you're getting new tires, they even add a charge on there for getting rid of those tires. So it makes me wonder if it's not just access to places to recycle, but if it's also, economic, that people don't have the money to get these things recycled. Can you speak to that?
Definitely. Tires is a great example because most places, if you want to get rid of your used tires, it's $4 to $5 a tire just to get rid of it. And a lot of counties are able to offer the scrap tire collection where we collect the tires from the residents and then the tires are recycled. But, not everybody wants to wait in line, or they have to work on Saturday. They just can't do it. So in that case, they're like, well, I don't have the money. And I know nobody's going to drive down this road for another at least hour. I could very easily toss it here. I recently found 10 tires right down the street from Pierce Cedar Creek. I marked the location so I can go back and get them. But it's really frustrating that people do that among couches, mattresses. I've seen some very interesting, I'll call it garbage art on the side of the road with stacked mattresses and different items. I don't think that people are doing it because they hate the environment or that they just want to cause a trouble for somebody else down the line. I think it's really just, yeah, like you said, they don't have the money to fix it. They don't know what else to do with it. And they also don't want it on their property anymore. So this is the solution. So it's, access is a big thing, but it's access beyond physical. It's also financial. And actually, one step further to physical, what if they don't have a way, to bring those tires? If they're in a sedan, they might not have room for more than one tire to carry it. So then they've got to find a friend with a trailer or a truck. And then there's a lot of different issues with that.
Yeah. Considerations through there. One of the things I was thinking about while you're talking about that, again, thinking about tires or pop bottles or what have you that's out in the woods. There's a public health component to this, right?
Yes. Tires collect water, standing water, which breeds mosquito habitat, or it breeds mosquitoes because it gives them a habitat to lay their eggs in. And then, as we know, mosquitoes carry diseases. So that's the main concern. And I believe that's one of the driving forces that Eagle uses to continue their scrap tire collection grants.
So besides access or cost, what are some other challenges that stand out to you about recycling? And one of the things that we've talked about is electronic recycling with this. And this stands out to me. I've been out to a couple of the household hazardous waste days that you've organized. And it is amazing to me. You bring in a semi trailer and we fill that thing with electronic recycling. Um, that stands out to me. So old televisions, I imagine like how many people have that many televisions stuck in their house. So that stands out to me. And I'm asking you, like, talk a little bit about that and what the challenges are that we face right now.
Yeah. So I'll start with a story. I think it was about 2012. I had a big CRT TV. It was probably, well, I say big, it was probably 30 inches. But for a CRT, that's a lot of weight. And I had to give it away on Facebook for free just to get it out of my house. You can't even do that anymore. You can't even bring those TVs to Goodwill anymore because nobody will buy them. And you can't throw it away because CRTs specifically have a lot of components that need to be taken apart in order to be recycled. So they have valuable materials like copper, gold, iron, and steel, but then they also have toxic chemicals like cadmium, mercury, and lead. And when you bury those in the landfill, the chemicals leach into the soil and the groundwater and can negatively impact wildlife and human life. So the only solution then is to recycle them. But it is expensive to recycle them because they are recycled by the pound. So oversized TVs for our event are 45 cents a pound. And these TVs can weigh 100, if not more, pounds. We've gotten some massive TVs. And I imagine that these people have just been holding on to them because they don't know what else to do with them. And so that's why when we're doing these events, I try to get the word out to as many people as possible. We actually collected last year in 2023, 17,500 pounds of TVs. So that's an incredible number. And it was 30,000 pounds of electronics total. So
I'm
more than
curious,
half.
do you know how that compares, like on an average, state or county or national? Like you might not. I was just curious if you don't know off the top of your head. That
It's
seems like a lot. 17,000 pounds of TVs, is that right?
Yes, it was a lot. And I don't know what it compares to. I could probably find information about other districts that do it around the state and maybe some more nationally, but I don't know that there's any sort of reporting happening. Although the Recycling Partnership has started a reporting for that, actually. So we will have that data very soon. I don't know how accessible it'll be to the public, but at least they will have it. So I'm
Good.
reporting. our data.
So where do all those go?
Um, Different organizations will use different recyclers. We are currently using Padnos. So they don't get recycled in our local scrapyard, but they actually get shipped out to, I believe it's Wyoming, Michigan, to their bigger facility where they are then sorted and processed there. And then beyond that, I'm not exactly sure where they go, but I'm sure Padnos would love to tell us.
So we are about 5 minutes away from where we want to end up here. And there's a couple of questions that I want to make sure that I ask you before we go here. Um, I guess, first of all, can you draw a thread? We've talked since the beginning about how you came to conservation, how you came to the conservation district, how you got involved in recycling, and what you're doing now. Can you tie a bow around all of that? And, how does your passion for each of these different things, how does that all come together?
I'll do my best. I think it all really comes down to conservation, conserving resources, using less, just generally being more sustainable and trying to support the planet that we were gifted. We have all these great natural resources, and if we can conserve them, and use recycled materials instead of virgin materials, they will last us a lot longer. They also take less energy to make. So I think, best practices on farms and residential lands to reduce pollution and save soil, plant health improves, pollinators benefit, humans and wildlife benefits. We all benefit from these practices, whether it be recycling, native plants, stormwater infrastructure, and of course, agricultural, because without food, we are nothing. So, I think it's very easily all just tied into conservation. That's it.
What upcoming event or project do you have on the horizon?
Well, I'm currently collecting broken holiday lights for recycling right here in the office. I'm located inside the Secretary of State building in Hastings in Suite 105. You can just follow the signs. Those will also be going to Padnos. They accepted my idea on a whim to quickly recycle these before people start throwing them in the trash because it's after the holiday season. Beyond that, I also getting ready for those semi-annual household hazardous waste, scrap tire, medication, and electronic collection events. I'll also be tabling at the Earth Day Expo in April and Family Science Night at the Hastings Public Library. So I'm going to have a pretty busy year and hopefully lots more to recycle.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. And before we get away, one other thing. For folks out there who are hearing what you're saying and thinking, okay, maybe I can level up in what I'm doing. What are some specific resources or media that you would recommend to others on the subject of recycling?
Okay. Well, a shameless plug for my own website, berrycountyrecycles.org. Also on Instagram and Facebook as either BC Recycles or Berry County Recycles. But also the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy has some great recycling resources. They've got a recycling directory. So my recycling and disposal directory is very specific to Berry County, but the state obviously has a much more robust one that goes further than our county boundaries. They also have the Recycling Raccoons, who have their own website, and they're very cute, and they have a lot of information about proper recycling techniques and why things are the way they are.
Excellent. So, in 2 weeks, our next subject matter, next guest is going to be David Camo. He is currently the supervisor of water safety with the Barry Eaton District Health Department. I got out that 5-letter acronym much easier than I did the last time I mentioned it. So we're looking forward to interviewing him, and consistent with this new format for Conservation Fridays, it will be hosted by both Rachel and myself interviewing David. So please join us. He is a candidate for the board of the Berry Conservation District. So we're excited to get to know him a little better in this format. Thank you very much, Rachel. I really appreciate you sharing more of your work and more of your life, and letting the public know about recycling today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity to talk about this.
And want to thank everybody who joined us today, and who watches in the future. Have a good rest of your day.